Morning.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. How are you?
I'm doing all right. You got the dog in the background,
Yeah, keeping me safe. Big
man.
vicious dog. Keeping me
just in case,
safe.
just in case this interview goes a little bit
That's right.
lopsided.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. She's a 5 kilo cavoodle, so she can't do a lot, but she'll bark.
Great to have you on board this morning, and you know, great moment in time where we can come full circle and announce a partnership between our two companies, our two businesses. Definitely going to bring a lot of value to young aspiring footballers in general, and those in particular who are looking at entering into the US collegiate market over the years ahead. So very excited about that. And for those of you who have just jumped on board, we have none other than Leon Keita. Leon hails originally from the UK, spent a lot of time in the US market as a student athlete himself, played at nationally ranked, in and out of the national rankings, top 25 Bellevue University in the NAIA. And we first met, funnily enough, I think you inquired by the website looking for work or some such many years ago now. But
Yeah.
and I was doing some work with kickoff soccer centres or leveraging their facilities to run camp and otherwise, and connected you with the ownership there, and you went on to really have a great career with Kickoff and really, I guess, create a great platform for technical development for a lot of young footballers locally. Outside of that, you know, grew and evolved as a young coach yourself. You're an A-licensed, FFA A-licensed coach today, but that journey all the way through working with academies like Kickoff, and then obviously through the technical director roles that you held with clubs like Dunbar and Sydney or otherwise, obviously amplified skill sets to another level. And it's just for us to be able to be in a situation where we have a dedicated training partner like yourself on board, and being able to be out there and really impact our young student athletes who are going into the US market. And again, just generally for footballers who are watching this, if you are looking for training here locally, one-to-one private mentorship, very strong guidance around your football and developing as a young athlete and a player, look no further than Match Football Academy. So we're very glad to have you on board, mate. We're going to kick off a little bit, and I'm going to let you kind of take over the mic a bit, but we're going to go back in time to a young Leon Keita growing up in the UK. Maybe you want to talk to one and all who have just jumped on board about your experiences growing up in the UK as a young footballer, and obviously where that took you, down the line into the US and otherwise. So maybe you want to give a bit of background.
Yeah, so from a relatively small town in the UK, and all I did was play football pretty much. That's all I sort of wanted to do. That and combined with my studies. So I was probably slightly above average footballer, and I was a half decent student. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I started playing for Boston United, who was who was in the Football League at the time. So I was in League Two. So I played for those from under 15. So that was the point when I started thinking, I'm okay. I'm okay at football. But my parents was really still pushing me on the academic side of things. So I kept both of those going. And then I didn't hear about the US pathway until I was 18. So I just finished my A-levels. I was just finishing up school. I was going to go to university in England. So I'd had everything was set up to go to university in England. And then I heard about the US scholarship route. So inquired about that, and then ended up taking a gap year to figure it all out. Went to sort of similar companies like Upper 90 that put videos together and sort of helped me connect with people out there. So that was sort of all off my own back. Travelled sort of up and down England to go to trials and do, because it was something I really wanted to do. I'd heard about it. I hadn't known anybody firsthand that had gone, and wasn't sort of fortunate to have this sort of information available. But I knew I wanted to play football at the best level possible. I knew I wanted to go to university. So to me, it was then a no-brainer once I was sort of released from Boston, and thought it's pretty difficult if you get released from a lower league club in England to then make it anywhere professionally. So being able to combine my academics with football was second to none. So I didn't really care where I went to. I didn't really care what part of the country it was. I just wanted to go to a good program. So after a few offers, I ended up going to Bellevue University, which the biggest reason for that was actually because it just turned out I had family in Omaha, in Nebraska. So because of having family there, it was kind of and it was actually my granddad, so my dad's dad, who I'd not seen for quite a while. So just sort of pure chance that a club.
There goes the dog. You need to bring him on.
Calm down a second. I know. My wife's just dropped off my son at daycare, so she's just coming back in. So yeah, I ended up in Nebraska, which is whenever I say I went to Nebraska, a lot of people sort of raise eyebrows and are kind of like, oh, you wouldn't necessarily go there, the very landlocked middle of the country. But I loved it. It was hot summers, freezing cold winters. But I went there for one thing, and that was to get a degree and play college football. So the experience on that was then second to none. And that's something. Then finishing it, I thought this is something I advise anyone to do, unless you've sort of got a contract with, in my opinion, with your Man Uniteds and with your top academies. It's a no-brainer. If you've got half a brain, you're only going to come out the other end a better footballer, a better person. And if then professionally is something you want to do, the opportunity is still there for you if that's still around. So to me, it's something that if you can, parents and players can be starting to look at it as at a younger age. It's just going to help you to know that's an option available and start to get your sort of ducks in a row to get that sorted out, to get as much money as possible, to get as good of an idea as possible of what it is out there, to understand that it's not just while it's amazing, it isn't all rosy. You are on the other side of the world as a young athlete. You are on your own. It is hard. You're not every other student are staying in bed until 10, 11, 12 every morning and doing their work and enjoying themselves, and that's part of it as well. But you're getting up at 6 a.m, at 5 a.m. You're doing double practices. You're travelling, and you've got to keep your studies up on top of that. So it's not easy. So you've definitely really got to want to do it and really understand what the process is. Yeah. Which I think is the biggest message that I want to get across to anyone thinking about going over. It's not a sort of walk in the park, and it's just you're not just playing football. You are a student athlete, and that does come first, and that is something that you've got to be able to manage. And you've got to understand that there's many different. We sort of touched about it last week on different parts on our on the Zoom conversation about there's many different levels of universities which in different parts of the countries give you different options. So the earlier people can understand that and know what options there are, the better, and understand that where they might be going might be a relatively isolated part of the country, where it's just a university town. There might be 40,000 people there, but it's just university people. So, and it may be, if you're living in Sydney and it's a pretty warm climate all year round, you may go to a part of the country that's not. Your November, December games are going to be in the snow.
Yeah.
It's going to be pretty cold, and you're going to be going to full practice in January, February, and I remember we lived just up the road from our university, and walking down, so we'd get 10 foot of snow every winter in Nebraska. So walking down to you'd walk down to the university, sort of down a hill, and the wind would blow up it, and it'd be minus 10, and it's 5 a.m. I've got to get up and go and do my prehab. I had bad ankles I had bad ankles pretty much my entire time, so I was constantly doing rehab. So I was in with a lot of other people in an hour earlier than everybody else to do your rehab. So I'd be walking down there at 5 a.m. in the dark, in the freezing cold, to do some ankle mobility work to then get to training. So it's things like those moments where you can sort of go, is this what I want to be doing? But I loved it. I love the fear that it gave you. You really felt like you was a professional athlete, and you touched on it before. How you get looked after and the facilities that's available to you. I can't see, there's not many clubs in the world that treat you like you do. That you get an experience to be a professional footballer, as long as you do the work that's needed. So. Yeah, that was my experience. And like I said, I absolutely loved it. And anyone that I know that went and did it, even if they didn't finish it for whatever reasons, they'll sort of turn around and say it's an amazing experience. It's a great opportunity to be able to do it, and especially looking at the sort of landscape of football in Australia and understanding it a little bit better now. Those opportunities to play at that level and to be in that environment really are scarce.
Yeah.
If just not here. I mean, AIS in Canberra, which was there, which isn't used as a facility as much anymore, is sort of your level of facilities the majority of universities have.
Yeah.
And that's the fact of it. And that's the national centre here. So that's pretty much what standard universities will have. No, never mind the big guns.
Yeah, and people get their minds blown a little bit when they hear about that. I was actually talking to one young lad, Aussie lad, who's been spending time in the academy system in the UK last night. He'd been there since he was, I believe, 13, 14. Aston Villa Academy, and then went off to some of the league clubs. And when I was talking about, he's obviously interested in going down the collegiate pathway. He hasn't really gotten that opportunity to go pro, and just like many of us in that kind of scenario, probably in similar boats at that age. But he was actually blown away, like exactly what you said there in terms of facilities, infrastructure, or otherwise. People will just think, well, it's just, these massive NCAA Division I schools that will have those kinds of facilities, but it's just not the case. It's right across the board, whether you're NCAA in any division, whether it be in the NAIA, whether you're in junior college. You can go to a junior college that, and some of the higher end junior colleges have fantastic infrastructure in place. So it's interesting that you say that, because we're seeing such a transition here locally of kids who, and you've touched on it. I think the AIS, and I think there was a platform, if you go back probably 2 decades, where if you were a talented footballer, you obviously played in a national youth league and a national league if you were playing in the elite levels, if you were lucky enough to do that. And then you'd be selected for Australian Institute of Sport. There were many, many different pathways to get there, whether it be through a schoolboy perspective, or or pathway, or whether you got directly selected to go to the AIS. But, it's not prevalent anymore. It's been left up to the clubs. Clubs probably don't have the infrastructure and the resources to be able to do that, to maintain, some kind of semblance of a pathway into senior team football for in most cases. So, and they just don't have the infrastructure and resources. So when you look at the international landscape, not just the national landscape, it becomes a no-brainer if you want to continue to evolve and grow as an athlete, to be able to enter into an environment like the US because of the resources, just the resources that you have in place, not to mention the fact that you're gaining an education that's transferable for life. But as an athlete, the infrastructure and all the resources that you get are second to none. So in terms of your time in the US, you played at Bellevue. You want to talk about a little bit about the landscape of the NAIA when you played there, and obviously the level that you played at, because some people get confused with divisions and otherwise. So.
Yeah. So when I went, I think it's a little bit more difficult now. But when I went, the NAIA was a bit of an easier route to go in for international students. It was a bit less stringent than NCAA. So the NAIA found itself with a lot of international players. So it grew the standard of the NAIA massively, because that was where a lot of international players were going, either to get in and then move on, or just to get in and stay. So the standard of the top end of the NAIA schools was good. We'd play into, like you said before, we'd play NCAA schools in the off season. So Creighton was our closest one, who are usually top 25 ranked NCAA team. We played on a few occasions, and there was always close games. So yeah, NAIA schools, typically smaller schools, so you'd probably go to them, and there'd be smaller campuses. That's probably usually just off a city centre or near a big city, but off the city, generally speaking. So you have that side of it. But yeah, the school's smaller, but often very heavily sport focused. So Bellevue University is actually one of the biggest online universities in the country. So massive online presence, but a lot of the day, I can't think of the numbers, but a lot of the day-to-day students was then just athletes. That was on the campuses. So you've got the other sports. It didn't have football, which is obviously a big one, but the majority of other mainstream sports it had, and that'll obviously be who we spent a lot of the time with. So we was, like I said, international school. A lot of the coach was English, so he recruited a lot of English players, but we had Colombians, Germans, Mexican. Lots of different countries and players playing, which is, again, in itself is an amazing experience to be able to play with different players from different cultures and different environments, which you don't get obviously in most countries. You play with your own. So that was what we had. It was in and out of the top 25. My 4 years there, we spent in the top 25. Ended up getting to three national tournaments, one to the last 16. Got beat by the winners twice. So you look at yourself as if we'd had a better run. We may have got a little bit further, but it weren't to be. But again, having that experience and being a part of a good team was important to me, and being a part of a team of people I felt comfortable with was massive. So that's sort of where we was. In terms of the training, then, like I said, we got there in August, and we trained 2-3 times a day for pre-season. We wanted to do well, and we expected to do well, so we had tough pre-season schedules. Usually went on a trip away somewhere, and we managed to sort of maintain that based on probably a lot of international students. Hastings College was. Well, I know some of the recruits has gone out there. The school down the road, they were our rivals. So there wasn't actually in our conference. It was in different conferences. So again, we'd play them most seasons, but it wouldn't be towards a conference game. But they obviously there are a lot of local guys that play there that have done in the end have done really well, and they went on the year after I finished to win it, and then they've been there and thereabouts again a few years since. So. And that's a slightly different feel, because it would always sort of be, when we played them, it'd be your international against your American kids, and that sort of ramped up our rivalry as well. With those guys being predominantly local boys, there was a few out, but they had a lot of local boys playing for them. So that's where Bellevue was, and then I did a year as an assistant coach before coming out here. So. I nearly stayed. I was going to be a graduate assistant, for a university. I'd got that, but I just decided I wanted to see a bit more of the world at the time. So I came out to Australia, and then I've not looked back since. So I've been here 8 years now.
Sick of the cold in Nebraska. Yeah,
yeah, it could have been.
Head out to
It
Sydney.
was 3 months. That's right.
We talked about, the fact that we're talking a lot about the athletic aspect, and that's all well and good. But from the academic perspective, what did you study? What did you finish in terms of your degree? Yeah. And in terms of the resources and otherwise that you had, given that you mentioned pre-season was 2-3 times a day, not to mention the season and classes and otherwise throughout conference play. What was it that you studied, and what kind of resources did you have as a student athlete when you were there to be able to gain that degree at the time?
Yeah, so I did sports management. I did it in the 4 years. So I was lucky enough to receive academic scholarship and as well as athletic, which we spoke about before, which was able to top it up and makes you more lucrative to coaches. So I was able to get both of those, which meant I had to keep my GPA above 3.5. I ended up finishing with 3.8, almost, I think 3.79, I think, GPA. So that's pretty much an A to A minus average across all the classes. So I took that part seriously. I was the captain of the team from sophomore year sort of onwards. So I took that as my role to make sure that I had to keep my grades up, to encourage the rest of the guys to make sure they do. So lots of schools have. We didn't actually have it in place as a separate program, but we had to maintain a 2.5 GPA to remain eligible to play. So everyone had to keep that average up. So we had things like study hall. So as part while we're travelling in that really intense pre-season and season part of the year, we'd have set parts of the week as well when we're away in our hotels and travelling, where we've got study hall for an hour or two before we go out to train. So it was kind of made, whereas lots of universities won't have that structure and that rigidness around, this is your study time now, this is that. We had that a little bit to make sure that everyone was getting it done. So wherever, if we was away, we'd get to a hotel and it'd be right, we've just arrived at 6 p.m. We've got 6 till 8 study hall. Get that done so we can make everyone knows they're getting the work done. We'd have buddies, so you sort of sophomore, your freshmen would be where you're buddied up with juniors, and sophomores with seniors, again to help out with that. So if you need anything with just help with the classwork, or if you need anything in terms of looking at what classes to do next and how to structure that, they'd help you out, who to speak to, who to see. You had a student advisor that would sit down with you and get you on the right classes. So the first year is typically your electives. So doing your core subjects, you have to do English, maths, and IT, and some like American studies. You sort of get those done and get those out of the way while drip feeding in your major, and then sort of second and third year really ramp up your major honours and your major classes to get those ticked off, and then your fourth year is you making sure you've got all the electives you need to complete a degree. So you have somebody pushing you in the right direction to make sure you're getting those done. Again, which I'm not sure if you get that as much if you're not a student athlete, but you definitely get somebody sort of hovering over you and making sure you've got this next class done, and then you have that team structure that keeps you accountable as well. So you're not just left alone to go. To get on with it, which I know a lot of my other friends that went to just regular universities didn't have, and perhaps struggled with that a little bit, especially in the first and second years of university, where they was really enjoying themselves, perhaps a little bit too much, and they didn't have that somebody over them being, you've got to get this so you don't get to play. So playing football really is a privilege, and it's done that way over there. You have to keep your academics up, because the stats are, everyone knows it, the chances are you're not going to play professional football. It's easier to get into Oxford and Cambridge universities, and so I'm sure there's not that many of us that can get into there. So if that's easier to do, then make a career out of playing professional football. Then we all know we need to get that. Parents will know that, especially as a younger person and player, you won't necessarily be thinking about that as a bigger thing. But yeah, that's the first and foremost. So having that guidance really helps you, and that helps me be accountable. I like being part of a team, so I will do a lot more, I think, if I'm part of if I've got that accountability. Like I said, being the leader of the team, I felt that responsibility. My responsibility was to keep my grades up, and keep everyone else coming along with me as well.
Yeah, and it sounded like, a very structured environment, at least at Bellevue, and being able to have that balance and have people around you, resources or otherwise, that kept you accountable to what you were there to achieve in the first place. And what a lot of kids don't realise is you're a student athlete. The student aspect comes first, and you're there to get your degree. I mean, you're going to be playing at a very high level. That's all well and good. Especially these days, just so many of these kids coming in from international markets across the whole landscape. So you will play at a good level, but realistically, you're on a scholarship, you're a paid athlete, they're paying for your scholarship, right?
Yep, that's right.
So before we transition to Australia and you work here, give us 3 things that I guess you learned from that whole experience of going into the US. Might be 1 or 2 things, but maybe 3 key things that you took away in terms of the student and also the athletic experience, if you could.
So do you mean things that led into sort of ongoing qualities? So things that I went away. Okay. So I guess. A big one for me is probably time management. So you're busy as a student athlete. You're busy. You've got lots on, lots to do, and sort of you have a couple of month period, and the season's done until spring season comes, where you're just a student, if you like, within reasons. You've still got your own program to be doing, so you've still got a little bit more on. So aside from that, you are busy. So taking that into the real world is massive, because I'm sure anyone will tell you, when you enter the working world, you're busy. You've got lots on, and it only gets busier. You then have children and get married and have extra work. So you only get busier. So that was a massive one. Being able to structure my days and understand and prioritize things around that. That was huge. The reliability, and people are dependent on you, the team's dependent on you and your grades. So that was a sort of another huge one, which I probably took on, which I liked. Like I said, I've always sort of been a leader of a team and always gone into coaching. So that's something that I always enjoyed before then anyway. It's definitely something which has taken me into sort of to bigger things. But yeah, but the main thing probably that we speak about more is that time management, because you are busy. You have got a lot on. You do need to prioritize, and also moving countries. I probably came. You just become more rounded, because you're on your own. So you haven't got you can't nip back to your parents for the weekend, which there's nothing wrong with that at all. But you can't. You're there for a while, so. You have to become comfortable knowing you can look after yourself from a relatively early age now. You're 18 and you've got to look after yourself. While you've got that guidance and you have got that structure to help you through, you're on your own. You've depending if you're in halls, but I was in apartments, so you're cooking your own food, you're washing your own clothes from that age. So that. It makes you well-rounded. You have to be able to look after yourself very, very early on. And there's times that are difficult. So there's times, like I said, when you're walking. I was walking down in the pitch black, freezing cold, and you might question, what do I want to be doing this? This is pretty tough. Season's finished. It's a short season. It's a while before it comes again. It's 5 a.m. I'm not playing football for another 2 months, and I've got to walk down to the gym to work on some rehab. So that sort of resilience was built up, and that understanding of no, I need to see the bigger picture on the tough days I'm seeing this through because I know what I'm getting out of it at the other end. And also, again, taking a back seat and going, actually, the good times far outweigh this small difficulty of having to get up in the freezing cold and walk down. So, but there will definitely be times when, being a young adult, where you're sat there questioning if it's what you want to do. You're meeting new people and on your own and not in you're definitely out your comfort zone. So there'll be times when you've got to sit and have little conversations with yourself about, no, this is the big, reminding yourself about the bigger picture. So that's really massively, and that's obviously now then moving to Australia, which home's always a pull, or whatever you call home and where you grew up is always a pull. But that's something that's, I think, going to America and having that step has helped me build that resilience of, when times aren't as great as you want them to be, you can stick it out.
Yeah, and I saw that, and just to give everyone a bit of clarity, I employed people for this business and to help grow the business, to help educate our clients. And I remember connecting with you, and I came out of a kind of a management background as well, and in the corporate world at one point as well. So for me, if I was hiring someone, I was looking towards hiring someone, they had to have traits around them that encompass a lot of those things. How do they face adversity? How have they challenged themselves in their life? And how have they overcome a lot of that adversity? How have they grown? And I think for me personally, I always look towards human beings, young adults who were who differentiated themselves. So when I saw someone that actually had a background where they said, hey, I traveled the world a bit. I was a student athlete in a foreign country. I was away from my family. I had to grow and adapt in that environment. There is a massive shift, a massive change in a person's mind when they're able to transition into that, transition from that and into a new role. So I was always looking at that, and lo and behold, you spent your time in the US, you did fantastic things over there, and then you transitioned to Australia. We connected, and certainly those traits definitely resonated with me, and that's where we really kicked off our kind of international exploration, different parts of the world. You and I traveling to different parts of Asia and South Asia and China and otherwise, and holding camps at international schools and being able to kind of educate kids as to your experience and my own. And it basically came for me full circle, in essence, that you spent time here in Australia and you started from the ground and you built yourself up to this point where you're actually running your own business. We'll get to that in a minute. But that transition over now as a student athlete into the Australian market, now you've got your degree, you played at a high level, you've had some coaching experience in the US college market. What was the transition like for you in Australia, and how did you leverage your education to build up yourself in Australia to the point that you're at today? And we'll get to what you're doing today in a minute.
Yes, the degree was vital to me being able to then stay in Australia. That's a requirement for me to be able to get sponsorship. So being from England, you can get a 1-year working holiday visa. Being from any part of the world, you can get a 1-year working holiday visa to come here. So I took that first option. It gets you in the door, and then learnt about opportunities to be able to stay. So I actually, when I first came here, all I'd done was football as an adult, really. So from 18, the year I had in the UK, 18 to 19, in the gap year, I worked as a coach, and then I went out to America, and my part-time work was as a coach in America. Then I did a year as an assistant. So all I'd done was football, and my degree was sports management. But I was kind of like the management idea, or I thought I did. So when I first got here, I was kind of like, right, I'm going to see if there's anything sort of outside of football. And after about 3 months, I ended up finding sort of spoke to different, as well as looking for sort of full-time work. I was still looking to, football was my passion, so football was always something I was going to do. So whether it's coaching work or finding out about the America pathway, a quick Google search, yourself came up, and we got in touch, and then you obviously put me in touch with Kickoff. So I was then, through my degree that I got, I was able to run. I was a centre manager at Kickoff for the Eastern Suburbs venue, so I ran their leagues and booked out the pitches essentially. So as a manager, and took care of it, maintenance, everything looking after sort of facility management. That was my role, and then part of that role, I set up a coaching program for them. So having been a coach, that was what I set up. So built that from the ground. Nothing there before we started, to now there's about 600 or 700 kids playing there across sort of 4 or 5 different venues and in different schools. So I built that up over a period of time. That enabled me to be sponsored to do that. So I was sponsored on the basis of my degree. To do that, so I spent 7 years building that up and building both parts of the business. Eventually becoming general manager of the company, looking after it across four different of its own locations, plus other different areas. So we sort of extended, and then while doing that, working at clubs, working at schools. So working at some private schools, working at other different schools in here. So sort of having a few roles so I can learn more and more about the Australian football space. So, and then also building up my licenses. So I'd done my C, my B and my A. Within 5 years, I finished my A last year. So got those done as quick as I can, and obviously learning loads on the courses and meeting good people along the way, and then decided. So I decided I wanted to sort of set my own thing up. Looking at what's out there's obviously lots of coaches. There's lots of academies. There's lots of quality coaches out there. Lots of good people doing good things. So it's always just trying to do your own things difficult, because it's definitely being done by very, very, very good coaches all across Sydney. So what I'm trying to do is I think slightly different. So it's individual or small group training only. So it's at the moment it's just myself. So the people I get to will work with me, and it'll be very position specific. So I think I've been able to develop the knowledge to understand positions well and understand what actions happen in certain positions. So if you come to me as a left back, we'll work on scenarios that happen to you as a left back. So yeah, you'll be working on your first touch and the core skills, which lots of one-on-ones do, and continuing to build up that base. But the other side of it will be doing it as a position. So as a left back, where do you need to take your first touch generally? As a left back, where does your shape need to be when you lose the ball? As a left back, when can you go long? What passes do you need to be looking for first and foremost? So, and then going into different positions. So we could have a left winger and a left back and a left winger working together, because it can be the same scenario. We could have centre midfielders receiving the ball, playing it into their 10. So you're working on those areas of the pitch that either you need to tune up on and understand a little bit more, and try to create. Obviously, it's one-on-one or small groups, so you can't ever create a match. But if you can try and create the scenario as much as possible, that's how you're going to improve. So, like boxing, when you spar, when you're sparring in boxing, that's when you do your most improvement, because it's as close to the fight as possible. You never recreate a fight, but you can get there as much as you can. And obviously, you can play more games. And that's what I recommend as much as anything for kids in Australia. I don't think we're playing enough games. We need to play as much matches as possible for school, for club. We need to play games. Players need to play games and understand the match more than anything, not just train. So with my training, I really try to recreate those moments that's going to happen to you in a game. So I'll talk to the player and say, right, let's have some conversations about things that happen to you in a game, and here's this moment, and then we'll repeat that moment, repeat that moment, and get perfect at that moment. Because generally speaking, you can probably go around each position and there's probably 4 or 5 things that each position needs to do really well. And if you master those 4 or 5 things, you'll be really good in that area of the pitch, and you'll start to stand out above everybody else. There's then obviously core qualities that I expect to either have or you need to start to develop in to give yourself a head start. Communications, that it frustrates me that you need to say it sometimes, but it's something that's sort of dying out the game. So to me, if that's something you add to your game, it puts you ahead immediately. It gets you noticed immediately. When I'm looking at players as a TD for people to come in, if there's a player that's talking and they're loud and they're confident, they can have a bad game, but I'm probably going, hang on, look, I'm taking notice of them. And I'm sure any coach will tell you different. They'll tell you exactly the same. So that's one thing that, forget your footballing ability, add that to your game straight away. It takes you to a new level. It takes you to look like a leader. You look like you're the one on the pitch that you can rely on, and that's just through talking. You're thinking things, say it, say it as you're thinking it. So I try to get those core qualities in first and foremost. We talk about those because ultimately the things that we actually work on, the position specific, is the very top of the pyramid. So we need to get this base right before we can get this top right. It's no good being really good at all these specifics if we don't have these basics right as well. So we discuss that in the process, and that's where the mentorship comes in. We have conversations about what they're doing outside of it, their load, and how we can manage that with what we're doing. Because obviously we're going to be doing extra work naturally, but we often don't want to. We don't just need to work for work's sake. So while we might be doing extra work because it's another session, we need to maybe manage that around what else you're doing. Because especially as kids get to sort of 15 and onwards, the load becomes a little bit heavier on the bodies to manage.
Yeah. I see a very, and I've been, especially at the start of this year, throughout prior to COVID, I spent a lot of time out at games on the weekends, and I was realising more and more exactly to that point where I could see the kids doing a lot of the tactical kind of specific things, but the technical aspects of the game, for the most part, it wasn't impressing upon me. You know what I mean? Whether it was being a goalkeeper or a defender or a midfielder or attacker, there were certain things that you just mentioned now that were just so important that aren't trained. And overarching all of that, I know growing up, you yourself, me, definitely, it was all about this. How can you communicate on the field? More importantly, how can you communicate when you're in front of a crowd and you're playing?
Yep.
Right. And you have to get, buffer out all that noise and able to communicate effectively. But I hear a lot of shouting, but not necessarily guidance and direction. So
that's right. That's definitely not saying go and just start shouting and be the loudest person on the pitch and be the most outgoing. You don't have to be that. You do have to communicate to those people around you effectively and say, give little messages all the time. So one thing I would say is just pass the ball, pass a message. So whenever you, that's a simple habit that 5-year-olds should be being taught. Pass the ball, pass a message. Then it's just every time you're releasing the football, you're passing something on. They're not just passing the ball, you're passing something else to them. So absolutely, because you can become just a shouter and a screamer, and that's definitely not what I'm saying. But just being effective with communication, tell somebody there's a man on, tell somebody to tuck in, tell somebody to step forward, tell somebody to drop in and get in the shape. So just little messages you can say all the time that's becoming extra players. So that's a simple thing that it's a habit that needs to be developed. If you don't naturally talk, it's something you've got to develop. So it's something you've got to try in training. So players often become uncomfortable in training because they're not actually talking to anybody because nobody's there. But it's like, but that's a habit you've got. It's a habit you've got to train. So it doesn't just happen. You don't just start doing it. It's a habit you need to train. Just as your first touch is a habit you need to train. That communication may be a habit you need to train. So we need to get players doing it in training, and then we'll start to see it in matches as well.
So you do a lot of positional specific training that is very tight groups, smaller groups, one-to-one, and there's a lot of power around that. I've been a goalkeeper coach now for the past 16
That's right,
years. So for that one-to-one kind of dialogue and being able to train, an individual in a very, very kind of direct manner, I think is very impactful. So what you're doing with, a match football academy is definitely all about that one-to-one interaction, I think, and those small group scenarios that really amplify some of the things that the kids need to work on, and then their strengths as well, and you're able to give very direct feedback, which is fantastic. Now, if we go back to this positional perspective and the way that you guys, the way that you're focusing on delivering your training, we had a question here from one of the viewers, and he mentioned there, say, for example, a forward, and I'm assuming what he's saying is, what do you see in a good forward? Yeah. So from your perspective, what are the traits that you would see in an attacking player that are important? Just specifically, we'll talk about a forward based on this.
So obviously, it's all my opinion, and that's why football is a beautiful game. But for me, the number one thing for a forward is scoring goals. So if above all you can score goals, you're doing well. That should be it. That should be the forward's focus. Can I score today? Every single game, can I score? It frustrates me when I speak to young players, and they don't know how many goals they've scored in a season. I find that incredible. That you wouldn't know that. Me being a defender, I know how many goals I've scored in my life. I can probably count it on two hands. So that to me is first and foremost. Obviously, that's easier said than done. You can't just you can't score goals, and you can't score goals every game, except for a couple of players on the planet that do so. But that should be your number one focus. It should be, can I score? Can I score today? So getting yourself into positions of how to score. So what I look for and ask for my strikers, once sort of defensive responsibilities are over, and that will again depend on your coach, is can you start to put yourself in a position that's going to give you the best chance to score as quickly as possible. So looking for strikers that are looking where their centre backs are. So looking to get in between the centre backs, looking for strikers that are off the ball, making runs in behind, that aren't waiting for things to happen. Looking for strikers who are perhaps a little bit selfish as a striker. You've got to want to get in 1v1 situations, and you've got to want to go, I'm gonna go and affect this game. That's what our strikers are. So in strikers, it's probably often qualities you, as a coach, especially to young players, a lot of the qualities you try to get out of, you want in strikers. So that's why often team training can be difficult, because you have to give generic messages to everybody as a whole of this is the people we want and the characters that we want. But actually, we perhaps want different characteristics for different areas of the field. I want my striker to be thinking about him a little bit, and to be thinking about how he's going to affect the game. I want my centre back thinking about the team and what I'm going to do for us, and sort of shaking my hand and looking me in the eye and knowing it's somebody I can trust and they're going to do the smart thing and make good decisions. But we need a bit of an X factor as a striker. So yeah, looking for that for a striker that is looking to score, perhaps a little bit selfish, but off the ball is really looking how they can affect the game. Which is a massive part of it. So we often just focus on the ball because it happens. But if you can get strikers and get players good at, okay, the ball, we're on the ball, but I'm not. I need to get in a position where I'm quickly affecting. So seeing where your centre backs are, looking for space, whether it be in behind or in between lines, but looking for the areas of space to affect the game.
And that's fantastic. I think the fact that you're looking at it not just from the technical perspective, but then how you think is obviously a very powerful,
the most powerful, in my opinion. We've got.
It sets the scene, it sets the context, right? So if you're not going to go, I mean, we can actually, you know what? It's interesting that you say it, because you can do 1,001 different drills. I see it all the time. So from a goalkeeper specific perspective, for example, this and that, pop here, do this. And when you break it down, it's all about just doing the simple things right. Okay. Right. And realistically, you know, I would rather do a very simple catching drill or a movement transition drill where, you know, you're using your feet, you're using your hands, but you're also conscious of what you need to do. And that's to save the ball, catch the ball effectively.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And I, you know, maybe we get caught up in this internet generation where there's a lot of very, very fancy technical things being shown just for the sake of wow factor.
Yep.
Realistically, training should be very, very simple. Whether it be you're a goalkeeper, whether it be you're an outfield player in different positions across the pitch, you have to be doing the simple things right. Because, you know, I go back in time many, many years ago, I was impacted by a lot of fantastic trainers like yourself. You're impacting so many kids out there with what you do. And a lot of my trainers who hail from different parts of the world, they taught me simple goalkeeping, how to, you know, enhance my skills in a very simple way. But then outside of that, you know, my outfield players who trained amongst us, with those kinds of individuals, teaching them, it was really just getting a feeling for the ball at your feet.
Yeah.
You know, being able to be comfortable on the ball, being conscious, you know, being present, right? And what happens is you just keep on doing drill after drill after drill after drill. You actually become a little bit mindless.
That's right. And I do think we're sort of creating that because we're sort of chasing the game to try and find quality technicians and technical players. So we can over drill that definitely, and they definitely have their place as passing practices and getting on the ball and getting touches and developing that. But if we can't think, and this is what I said about, you can never recreate matches ever. That's why people need to play as much as possible. But you can, if you can recreate that moment as much as possible, and you start to get our players switching on to their imagination of, right, I can imagine myself receiving the ball in between the centre back and centre midfielder here, and I can get my body shape right so I can take my touch forward. So they're thinking about the application of those technical qualities. Yep. Outweighs, yep. And that's what separates the great from the good, in my opinion, is the ability to understand the moment, and you only get that from experience of being in that moment or recreating that moment as much as possible. And that's what we got with the goalkeeper training. You're recreating moments as much as possible. Like, you can do loads of technical things, and there's lots of gadgets that definitely do enhance your training. There's no doubt about that. If you're training on a regular basis, you need fresh things. You need to be thinking about new ideas and keeping your training fresh and moving forward. But you speak to most pros, and the best ones just do the basic things well all the time. So not once or twice, or they do them well all the time, and that's the most common thing. So yeah, with any position, if we can do those basic things well constantly, and that's the training habits, in my opinion, and getting habits right, that'll be where you're able to stand out. You don't give any 6 out of 10 performances. 7s and 8s is your base, and then you have your worldie games in between.
Yeah. So, conscious of time, we've probably only got a couple of minutes before Instagram kicks us off. Yep. We're going to plan, I think, Leon, I think now, given that we have the relationship now, I think every few weeks, I think doing player-specific or positional-specific little sessions that help a lot of our viewers and kids who are considering going over to the US, or just general, you know, kids who are here, you know, in Sydney and different parts of the world who just want to learn a little bit more about, you know, some of the things that we discussed today outside of just college soccer recruiting unto itself. We can cover that as well. I think that's something that's we should plan ahead for. Outside of that, talk a little bit about very quickly how our viewers in Sydney can find you, and just to preface that, one and all, Leon is also available to take video calls. So if you're in international markets, you want to get in touch with myself and or Leon, we're able to connect you to Leon. Leon will be able to guide you through potential, video sessions or even just video coaching as well, which is fantastic that you're committed to that. So maybe you want to talk about where you're training currently in Sydney, where people can find you, and maybe a little bit about, your web address and all that kind of stuff. And
so happy for anyone to connect. So initially, at the moment, we've got my website's just gone live, so it's matchfootballacademy.com, which we'll put in the bio, and we'll put on links to here. So matchfootballacademy.com is where you can find it. Try to keep it as little info, little writing as possible. If you're interested in finding out more information, just fill out the form on there. I'll get your details, and then I'll be in touch. So whether that's in Sydney, at the moment we're having a little break. We'll start again. We'll do an 8-week program from the 2nd of August. So we'll be going again from them. So I'm just looking at booking those players in now. So just jump to our website, fill in the form, or you can contact me on Instagram or Facebook at Match Football Academy. We'll jump on there and I'll be in touch. So anyone Sydney based, we will be starting our 8-week program on the 2nd of August, and it'll be around the eastern suburbs, around Moore Park area is where it'll be here. But then again, international students, if you want some information or you want to connect at all, please feel free to do so via the website or via the social media.
We literally have only a few seconds left. So what I'm going to do is just let you guys know we have Coach Peter will be at our camp on Friday at Homebush. You can find the link to register for that camp. Coach will be leading the sessions, technical sessions there. You can find the link to register on our bio. So just click on that link in our bio at U90 College here on Instagram, and you're able to register for this Friday's event from 9 to roughly about 12. Training, goalkeeper training, technical training with Coach, and then obviously we'll have a breakaway session towards the end for information and feed you some information about the college soccer recruiting pathway. So, Coach, thanks again. Really appreciate it. Very excited about our partnership and moving forward. And we'll talk to you very soon.
Awesome. See you all soon. Thanks, John.
Thanks, mate.
See you guys. Bye.
Bye.